One Piece has some pretty absurd censorships. I mean, they completely took out Smoker's iconic cigars and just left the smoke. But that's not as crazy as when they replaced Helmeppo's gun with... I'm not gonna tell you what it is, because I couldn't even tell you what that is. And to top it all off, the alcohol they would drink was censored to be orange juice, which I personally prefer. But these are just some of the obvious One Piece censorships. Later, we'll be covering even crazier, obscurer ones. Like when the 4Kids adaptation changed Sanji's cigarette to a lollipop. You can't look tough and edgy with a lollipop, man, come on. And yet another weird change in the 4Kids anime is they changed the Marines text to say Navy. Like, why? Is this even considered censorship? Maybe not, but can you guess what they censored the Marines guns to? If you guessed the 2007 McDonald's Luffy Beyblade toy, well, you'd be wrong. They actually switched all their guns into water soakers, because that's just what pirates use, apparently. I suppose that's the price you pay when you make the show family friendly. What does being family friendly mean? You have to turn these poison spikes to plungers? And does it also mean we gotta have no blood at all? Throughout the whole 4Kids dub, there was absolutely no blood shown. It just looks like they fought a cat. And of course, Buggy would not be able to use his Chop Chop powers to avoid this next censorship, because they completely took out Buggy's dual swords and didn't even do a good job at it. Look at this, the sword is literally blended into his arm. That cannot be comfortable. And that's not all. If we take a look in the original anime, one of Buggy's crewmates was originally black, but for some reason 4Kids decided to make him white. What are you trying to say, 4Kids? Now, on a kind of different note, Buggy's notorious for being cruel to his crewmates. We all know that. So much so that he was shown in the anime to be choking this guy out, although he did let him go in the end. If you take a look at the scene in the manga, though, Buggy actually holds him still while they blast a cannonball right through him. Talk about an explosive temper. So yeah, that was pretty brutal. But have you ever wondered where Luffy got his face scar from? Well, in the manga, Luffy cuts his own face within the first 5 pages. But in the anime, they just completely censored it. And it took 800 episodes to finally show us. Anime only's had to wait a real long time for that one. We all know that Oda is famous for drawing women with the most accurate of figures. So this next censorship should make a whole lot of sense, because 4Kids ended up censoring anything that has to do with women's well, you get the idea. In my saddest backstories in One Piece video, a lot of you said Zeph didn't eat his own leg. Well, actually, if we look in the manga, instead of Zeph cutting off his own leg with an anchor to save Sanji's life like we see in the anime, Zeph actually eats his own leg to survive. So yeah, this scene was so dark, Toei had to censor and replace it with the anchor scene in the anime. But that's not all. During the Baratie Arc, when Sanji agrees to cook for Don Krieg, all the chefs are angry at Sanji, and they hold up these ridiculously oversized kitchen utensils. But if we look for the same scene in the manga, the chefs are actually holding up guns to Sanji's head. The One Piece creators made this change since guns are just banned in all of 4Kids adaptations. However, this next censorship is even more ridiculous since 4Kids changed the iconic "We Are" opening into some ridiculous rap, which just does not sound as good, man. I miss bringing along my hopes and dreams. Now, Luffy is certainly an over-the-top character, but that's why we all love him. And because of this, one change that 4Kids made was just immensely stupid. In a lot of different scenes, 4Kids actually edited Luffy's mouth closed, which doesn't make any sense. Do you think kids shouldn't smile with their mouth open or something? I just can't get over how uncanny this actually feels. And speaking of uncanny, some of the voice acting done by 4Kids was completely different as they changed some of the characters' accents. For example, Shanks was given an Australian accent, which in reality is supposed to be from Ireland.
Oops. But here, why don't you have this?
Mihawk was given a European accent, which sounds like a French accent, but Oda said that he'd be from Spain.
Yes, that was the plan.
And if you think it stops there, just hear what they did to Sanji.
We cannot let them destroy this ship.
Honestly, Sanji from New York might go hard. But changing the voice of a character is one thing. Now imagine changing the entire character's name, since this is what they did with one of the most iconic characters in all of One Piece. Smoker in the 4Kids adaptation of One Piece is actually called Chaser, which, I mean, makes a little sense, because they didn't want kids to learn about smoking. Well, from One Piece anyway. However, this is only one of the many weird name changes. Another example of this comes from Ace, since they actually call him Trace in the 4Kids adaptation. This one makes no sense, man. What, you don't want kids to learn about gambling, ace, and poker? That isn't as bad as this next censorship, because did you know that you've been saying Zoro wrong this entire time? Rorunora Zoro is actually called Rorunoro Zolo, the One Piece manga. And if you know anything about Japanese, that makes a whole lot of sense, because R and L are seen as the same. So the translator just kind of threw a dart at a board and yep, we're going with Zoro. But they didn't end up fixing it later on because Viz Media didn't want copyright issues between another swordsman named Zoro. One rather iconic character within One Piece is King Cobra, but the 4Kids adaptation of the anime decided to completely change his name to King Nebra. And at this point, I don't really know what 4Kids is doing. Now, Zoro in the manga is way more unhinged than Zoro in the anime, since when you look at the earliest chapters of the One Piece manga, Zoro does some things that make him really evil. In the beginning of the anime, we see Helmeppo sending his wolf to attack Rika, but Zoro throws a chair at it and just knocks it out. However, in the manga, Zoro actually just kills the wolf in cold blood. Dude ain't a pirate hunter, he's more like a wolf slayer, man. Anyway, speaking of Zoro, he has another big censorship in the anime as opposed to the manga. While Zoro's fighting Kabaji of the Buggy Pirates, Zoro intentionally lets Kabaji stab him to give Kabaji a slight advantage. But in the manga, Zoro is even more badass as he actually just stabs himself to give Kabaji an advantage. What a guy! And that censorship pretty much makes sense, but sometimes 4Kids censorships can be pretty weird, as we've learned over the past like 6 minutes. One thing that 4Kids always makes a huge effort to censor is anything that could be connected to religion. And so, when they saw this next scene, of course they decided to kill it. While Zoro's tied up in the courtyard of Axe Hand Morgan, they removed the top of his post. The reason for this is they thought Zoro resembled too closely to Jesus on the cross. Now, they also went as far as to remove Mihawk's cross necklace and his longsword handle. That is straight up blasphemy. Now, suggestive clothing is practically a staple for the franchise, and it has of course been censored out across various different versions. However, the censors had to definitely work overtime with Vivi's outfit. In the manga, Vivi's outfit looks like this, and I am sure you can tell it is drawing attention to a strictly monetization non-friendly area. So the anime decided to get rid of that design entirely. However, it does make a cameo in certain One Piece movies, so they clearly didn't hate the design, they just felt it wasn't appropriate. And inappropriate clothing is something that One Piece's South Korean release would change entirely, as they decided to give Nami a shirt to wear in scenes where she is just wearing a bra. This is because South Korea has some pretty weird rules around clothing in the media, but you know what? I'm not complaining. Luffy's abilities and attacks are one of the reasons that everyone loves Luffy. However, did you know that one of his most iconic abilities was completely censored by 4Kids? His ability known as Gum Gum Pistol was changed to be Gum Gum Blast, because no guns. Speaking of attacks, we know 4Kids has a pretty weird and inconsistent policy around violence, since while fighting against the Buggy Pirates, they cut some weird moments. Most notably, whenever Luffy punched any of them in the face, it was either removed or the impact of the punch was taken out entirely. They would eventually relax this policy a bit, since Luffy does punch quite a few people in the face throughout the entire One Piece anime. This next censorship makes so much sense when you take a closer look. When we were first introduced to Portcullis D. Ace in the anime, we see his iconic white beard back tattoo. But in the manga, instead of the cross, he has this symbol. Now, I know how this looks, however, this symbol is actually the manji, a symbol of prosperity, happiness, and luck. But obviously in the West, it would be known for a very different reason, so it was changed to be a cross. 4Kids makes a huge effort to censor a lot of things revolving around Japanese culture across countless anime. However, for One Piece, it's probably seen the most censorship of just about any anime ever. For example, do you remember in the early days of the anime when Zoro was held captive on the Navy base on Shell Island? This little girl brings him some rice balls, but in the 4Kids version, she brings him some pretty horrendous looking cookies. I mean, why are they so tiny? And actually, while we're talking about censoring Japanese culture, Mr. One's chest tattoo. And to be honest, just about any Japanese text at all of that was removed entirely from the 4Kids adaptation of the anime. Now, shifting gears entirely, Kuina's death is a really tragic event in Zoro's story. However, the censorship here is absolutely wild. In the 4Kids version, Kuina doesn't actually die, but is rather jumped by a group of men and forced to retire. Now, this makes absolutely no sense for Zoro's character, since Kuina's death really sets up his character's ambitions. But they actually also did this with Bellemere, since Arlong doesn't actually shoot her, but rather imprisons her. Surely this would make Nami a bit less motivated, right? Understandable, I guess, but weird. Another shocking moment in the East Blue Saga comes from when Nojiko and Nami are fighting off the Marines at Belmir's Tangerine Farm, when suddenly Nojiko is shot by Marine Captain Nezumi. But in the manga, Nojiko is actually shot by what appears to resemble an entire firing squad. Firing squads were a common execution method throughout history, and so the censorship is evidently trying to hide that little factoid. And actually, they also changed another aspect of Kuina and Zoro's backstory. While Zoro and Kuina are discussing that Zoro will one day overtake her, Kuina seems to grab her, you know where, to indicate that she'll one day be overtaken by Zoro because she's a girl. Now, of course, the 4Kids version completely eradicates that. This is not all that has changed about Zoro, since in the South Korean release of the anime, Zoro's swords have been recolored to be completely black in certain scenes, because the silver makes them resemble weapons too much, apparently. I don't know. I mean, you can still very clearly see that they are, in fact, swords. Anyway, devil fruits are the most iconic part of One Piece by far, and everyone is super excited to wait and see when Luffy will come face to face with another foe wielding the powers of said devil fruits. Wait, hang on. Oh, sorry, did I just call them devil fruits? Oh, no, that's so embarrassing. Nah, guys, sorry. I meant to say the cursed fruits.
It's you! Awesome! Did you eat a cursed fruit?
A flare fruit.
But yeah, censorship is pretty annoying sometimes. But imagine if One Piece never even had the entirety of the Reverse Mountain arc. You know where I'm going with this. You don't actually have to imagine it, because that's exactly what 4Kids did. They up and removed an entire arc, and at the time, it didn't seem too important. But over time, the removal of Laboon and Crocus would affect the story in a pretty huge way, because we know later down the line, the Straw Hats meet Brook, which his whole story is pretty much about meeting Laboon and how he wants to see him again, so this scene where he's crying wouldn't make too much sense without the Reverse Mountain arc. But this actually affects the Straw Hat Pirates in a lot of different ways, because Crocus is the one who gives the Straw Hat Pirates the log pose to Whiskey Peak, or as it's called in the 4Kids version, the Grand Compass. But instead they decided to make it so that Usopp had a Grand Compass the entire time, but just didn't know how to use it. That Sanji did know how to use it, as Zephyr taught him. However, these are not the only things that were removed from the 4Kids adaptation, as they also removed Little Garden entirely, meaning that the 4Kids adaptation removed Giants and Mr. Three's introduction. Once again, at the time, being pretty meaningless, but eventually becoming a huge loss to the series. Because then you have to ask the question, who is this guy that saves Ace? Why is he here? Or what is Hellbath? So yeah, being a show about pirates, obviously the characters are going to use guns, but of course in the 4Kids adaptation, while fighting Captain Kuro, they removed the gun that was used by both Kaya and Usopp and replaced it with a slingshot. I mean, the gun never really worked that well to begin with, but I mean, it's better than the slingshot. One thing that One Piece has done amazingly though for years now is character design. Guess what 4Kids did to that? I'm not even talking about censoring the bust on female characters. No, I'm talking about just designs in general. Ace, for example, they decided to change his name to be Trace, as we mentioned earlier. They also removed his tattoo that said Ace. And would you be surprised to hear that the creators of the manga and the anime have actually come together and worked on different stories together? Well, a great example of this comes from the character Sabo. Sabo's backstory was never actually included within the manga, but was included in the anime. And this is actually what Oda had written as the character's backstory, but just never had time to slap it in there. So instead gave the draft to the showrunners to just say, go ham, ball. And that's exactly what they did. Going back to Luffy for a bit, he has grown quite a huge fan base over the past couple of decades. And of course, his #1 fan is none other than Bartolomeo, who will just do anything for his idol, including beating up anyone who badmouths him. Well, during the Dressrosa arc inside the Coliseum, Bartolomeo overhears someone talking smack about Luffy before he grabs his tongue and threatens to cut it out before beating him to a bloody pulp. Well, in the manga, Bartolomeo's love for Luffy seems to be considerably larger than that, as he does actually cut out the tongue of this random fighter. If I've conveyed one message to you throughout this entire video, I would hope it's that One Piece is not really a franchise entirely made for kids, since it's got a lot of suggestive stuff in it. Clothing, violence, swearing. The anime makes a huge effort to avoid using any physical swearing, such as middle fingers. And this can actually be seen when Law flipped off Kid in the manga. I forgot he did that. Speaking about the anime changing things, in the anime, Akainu and Whitebeard's battle is fierce, and it eventually leads to Akainu blowing off half of Whitebeard's mustache. But in the manga, this battle has far more dire consequences, since during this battle, Akainu actually blows off half of Whitebeard's face. Sanji's a very interesting character within the world of One Piece, and we know in the anime, he's quite the woman lover and would never hurt a woman at all. One thing that was removed from the anime that was kept in the manga, though, was Sanji trying to buy someone. Yep, straight up buy, with money, transaction, receipt, and everything. As during the auction house scene, Sanji asks Nami if we can buy her, quote unquote. In the anime, they changed this to have Sanji be furious at how they could treat people this way. Yeah, definitely an out of character moment for Sanji. This next censorship is truly dark, because when the Wano ladies are slowly starving, Luffy and his crew come just in the nick of time to save everyone from starvation. But this scene looked a whole lot different in the manga, I'll tell you that. Because you see, this town was actually just a few minutes away from ending it all. And that's when Luffy and Zoro brought a whole lot of food to the island. Yeah, now this censorship makes a lot of sense. Another interesting character is Bellamy. Very menacing, actually, more than just interesting within One Piece. And this is no more evident than his card game against Roshio. Bellamy must be a pretty sore loser, as he actually ends up stabbing him in the hand, shooting him in the leg, and then smashing a bottle of alcohol over his head. Well, buckle up, ladies and gents, because Bellamy ain't even done yet. Because in the manga, Bellamy's crewmates decided to join in the fight and set Roshio on fire. And this was censored because that's pretty traumatizing. Next up, we got Mr. Three's brawl against the giants. And this is just absolutely, this is one of my favorite scenes within the One Piece anime, like in its entirety. But the manga made this far more terrifying. In the anime, to finish off the giants, Mr. Three decided to use his devil fruit powers to make giant shackles for the giants. But in the manga, he decides to make giant swords to run through the hands of the giants and the feet also. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Anyways, guys, if you don't want One Piece to censor any more scenes, click this video right here. Subscribe, like the video for more, comment down below what you think, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.